Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday, about 8 o'clock, a little bit before market open. How about that GameStop earnings after the bell? We talked during yesterday's video, the expected move around 9.5%. Saw some of that move initially and then saw a pretty large move this morning. The stock was on what, 29.79, I think, high or 29.92, and the volume was pumping this morning. I'd shared on X. Let me just double check, make sure I was looking at the ad. The 29.92 pre-market high, and this was well over an hour ago. The volume was over 2 million already on the pre-market, which was pretty wild to see. We talked last Friday too about the 23 and 23.50 or 23 and 23.50 calls. I had posted those an hour after the open last Friday for OPEX. They were just slightly in the money, and those are quite in the money now. Like I said, those were the 23 and 23.50. So the 23 from around $218 to around what, 600, 500 a contract this morning at the open, roughly, and then on the 23.50 from $187 to around 450, 500, just depending on the opening price. And not too bad from a Friday entry to the opportunity for earnings. So I know one of the big things that got a lot of people talking about yesterday was GameStop announces update to its investment policy to add Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset. Basically, they announced that its board had unanimously approved an update to its investment policy to add Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset. So basically, what that means is the board said, sure, we're on board with that. We voted. And they agree that Bitcoin can be added as a treasury reserve asset on the GameStop balance sheet. It did no way, in shape, or form indicate that they have added it or that they will. It's just that they can. So that was something, that I think that was not necessarily misconstrued, but that might have been the assumption they've already added. Maybe they are, maybe they will. Either way, it's now an update to their investment policy. It's now they have the green light to do such, and they obviously needed board approval to amend their or their investment policy. So a couple of things we want to look at today. We want to look at the earnings. We want to look at that option flow from yesterday, and a quick look at that chart, so we can take a look at where we're at in terms of like moving averages, because we talked about that kind of setup as we were approaching the 200 SMA, and that was the push up to 25, and then you saw a little bit of movement and some options there. And we take a look here at the GameStop earnings that came out shortly after the close yesterday. And we talked about this. We said the analysts were expecting sales to kind of have declined a little bit year over year, which they did. Net sales were actually down for the fourth quarter compared to last year. So for this quarter, they were 1.283 billion, and then last year compared to 1.79 billion. So let's zoom this in for you, make it a little bit easier as we do the video. So and they were estimating, earnings 8 cents per share, but they actually did a little bit better than that. So let's see, the selling general SG&A expenses 282.5 mil for this quarter compared to 359. So a little bit less expense, so more profit in that regard. So net income though for the fourth quarter was 131 mil, not bad compared to the 63.1 mil for the prior year fourth quarter. So last year 63.1 mil for the fourth quarter net income, so actually turned a profit, and then this quarter 131.3, not bad for the fourth quarter. So it puts their adjusted EBITDA of 96.5 million for the fourth quarter compared to 88 a year ago. So cash equivalents, marketable securities was 4.775 billion. So they still got all their cash. I did note too they completely wound down Italy and wind down of store operations in Germany. So they completed divesting from Italy and the wind down of store operations in Germany. We've been talking about that since the last report, just about winding down some of the European market. We know they're looking to sell some of the other markets as well. So we looked at that full year overview. Net sales was 3.82 billion, so definitely light in 24 compared to the 5.27 bill in 23, which a lot driven by consoles. So expenses 1.13 bill compared to 1.3. And then the net income for fiscal year 131.3. Let's see, compared to net income of 6.7 million for fiscal 23. So not bad in that regard. And then you can see their adjusted EBITDA, a little bit change there. They don't do a call, as we know. And then if we pull up here, so this is just for the quarter here, diluted earnings per share 29 cents. So not too bad there. And then if you look, see, this was a year ago. The 14 weeks ended last year, so it had been fourth quarter of last year was 21 diluted earnings per share. So not too shabby in that regard. So let's take a look here at some of the other. We say like cost of sales, gross profit, asset impairments. So net income 131.3, 63.1. Don't know if you guys spend a lot of time on balance sheets. It's really great to look at the data. It just makes it easier to interpret that. Then you can take a look at here the percentage of net sales. Let's see. Cost of sales, gross profit. So gross profit, what I wanted to see, 28.3%, a little bit higher that this quarter than a year ago. So they've managed to improve the profitability a little bit and increase. If you look at percentage of net sales, 3.5% on net income a year ago and 10.2% this past quarter. Not too shabby, Mr. Ryan Cohen. And then for the year end, the 131 net income versus 6.7 million. So if you look at the this is a full year, so we got diluted earnings per share 33 cents compared to 2 cents last year. Not too shabby, not too shabby. And then here was the actual cash. So last year only had 921 mil. Now we got 4.75 billion cash and cash equivalents, marketable securities, total current assets. And let's see here. There you go. Total liability stockholder equity was 2709 a year ago and 5875. There you go. That's not too bad. And let's see what else we're going to look at real quick as we move on to the option flow. Just wanted to double check that cash here. Repayment of French loans. Yeah, because I know I know they're trying to wind that down in France. They're trying to sell it. Cash equivalents 4.789.8. That's man, that's quite a heap of cash there. So not too bad, not too bad in that regard. Let's look up at some of that sales mix. Because I know we talked yesterday. I wanted to look at like collectibles and things like that because they were nearing 1 million cards graded on PSA. So we looked at collectibles. Let's see. Percent of total sales a year ago was 13%, but collectibles this year, 21. That's up. That's what I wanted to see. I actually highlighted that last summer. Would like to see collectibles continue to increase as a part of the net sales, a higher percent of the total. Not too shabby. So hardware accessories a little down, software a little bit down, but collectibles. That's a nice move there. If you look, net sales 233.7 to 270. That's all right. That's moving in the right direction. That's for the quarter. And then for the whole year here, let's see, collectibles still down it's still down. I mean, better quarter, but 754 for last year compared to 719. This is for the whole year right here. And then hardware down. So they are down, total net sales there in comparison. So, I mean, that was to be expected. They were kind of analysts had talked about that. So, yeah, that's not too shabby. That's not too shabby. Let's jump over here, take a look at that option flow yesterday. You see as the price was moving around, and we saw some of that premium come out, and then kind of more of a surge around 130 as net call premium moved back up. So it did close the day around 440,000, with net premium around 574,000. So total premium on the day was 20 million in that regard. So we take a look at some of the highest volume contracts traded yesterday, and then we'll take a look at the open interest changes before the opening bell here. We talked about the 30s yesterday, and some players were trading the 50s. We saw the 30s for April. Some activity, the 125s for June. We talked about that. Some traders, were playing the volatility into earnings and into June. And we saw the $30 calls as well yesterday. Let's see, 6,000 bid volume, about 7,000 ask. So even though it was 14,000 volume yesterday, about 500,000 premium, only saw about 3,000 of those appear new open interest. So not a whole lot of open interest came from those 30s, but they were short dated. Now I will say they did rally from $27 to about $35. Not a whole lot. Might be up a little bit at the open. Some of these $50 calls were being, you can see, bought and then sold. You see, I have bid and ask volume here. Again, about 10,000 traded yesterday, but only about 3,500 in new open interest. These were $50 calls that expire Friday. So whoever was selling these just might have taken free premium on the idea that they felt GameStop would not close above 50 and they would just safely keep their premium. Saw the $25 calls yesterday for this week and 27s for April. I think those were being sold. I did see quite a big block of those. Let's see, 5,400 volume yesterday. Open interest did increase about 2,200. There's about 750,000 total premium. OI did increase, but those probably changed hands. So I assume, let's see here, could have been a good fill, maybe sold to open. Some of those only because they did hit the bid. Let's look at the actual fill though, because sometimes you can get a good fill, so it'll be denoted as either a bid or an ask, and that may not necessarily have been the case in that regard. A lot of these were hitting the bid. Let's see, 135 based on the price. We're looking here at the bid and the ask. See, 135, 147, and then the price that was filled was 135. So that lets us know they more or less hit the bid. That was a flow alert on unusual whales, and they were absolutely slamming the bid, selling the 27 calls, 650,000 on that. That was just a repeated hit right there on unusual whales. Let's take a look here. 2,200 new open interest, bid sides. There could have been some selling. I mean, that might be a different story. See, 27s for April. That particular trader may not think those will stay, because it is over 27 at this time. Let me make sure GameStop is trading. We'll look at our pre-market number here, 28.27 right now. Okay, so those are in the money. So we'll just have to we'll take a look and follow those, because like I said, when you see a big block hit the bid and get alerted on unusual whales, you take a look. But that doesn't necessarily mean sold either. Sometimes you can get a good fill. It could have been bought in this regard. With the spot price very low, leaning toward the bid, I would suggest those were more likely sold to open, and some of those did change hands. So you can take a look at that, pause, take a screenshot here, take a look at some of that volume on these other contracts and expiries. But let's take a look at actually where the bulk of that money was made up yesterday during trading, as we're going to sort the top premium here. So we're going to be looking right here in this column. The top thing, more of those 27s for April 17th. And like I said, a lot of bid volume there. The 26 calls for this week, $30 calls for this week, 30s for January, which we talked about those yesterday. The 25s for April, we talked about those, and the 30s for April. So we did see some more of that activity today as well, or pardon me, on Tuesday ahead of earnings. Again, you got some bid and ask volume. Open interest didn't increase, but that doesn't mean that new players didn't enter. Contracts do trade hands. So, for example, you bought to open and then sold in the same day, but you might have sold it to somebody else, but the contract remains open. That's how open interest can look a little different in that regard. So here we are, top premiums here over 250,000. 30 calls for June, 50. Those are traders that are playing volatility, either buyers or sellers or combination of both. Could be looking to capture premium on both sides of that trade. So you're welcome, like I said, to pause here or take a screenshot so you can look a little closer at these calls and expiries. Like I said, nothing too like super directional, except for that 27 for April really looked like sold to open. The 30s for January looked sold to open, and then like 25s for April, though, for example, those look a little more bought to open, but open interest didn't change. But there's still 8,800 open interest out there. So like I said, a lot of times these contracts will simply just trade hands in that regard. So let's take a look at our open interest changes for this morning before we get you going into the open here. So we take a look at our largest increases was the 125 calls, the 30 calls for this week, 23 puts for this week. So here are your largest increases to open interest. So you probably saw some more of the 125s. Yeah, you did see some more of those yesterday. Those were filling around 50. So if you don't think GameStop's closing at 125 or higher by June 20th, and you want to collect some premium, you could sell a 125 call. They'll pay you $50 in premium. As long as GameStop closes below 125, you'll make $50, so 100% on the trade. If GameStop were to close at 125 or higher, you'd be assigned 100 shares that you already own. They'd be sold at 125. Probably wouldn't bother you. So very, very common. But like I said, you had 4,000 volume yesterday, but a little bit, 900 or so less open interest today. So some money coming off the table in that regard, and contracts trading hands as well. So let's take a look here. Oops, I changed our. I adjusted our open interest there on accident. We resorted there. Okay, the 23 puts. I think they were selling a lot of those yesterday. Yeah, there's a couple there. Might have been bought to close. Let's see, 4,400 volume, 1,700 in new open interest today. Try to look at the bid and the ask about the same. And then quite a big load probably came out right there, selling those into close, short expiry. They felt that GameStop would close above $23 by Friday, so therefore they'll keep $32 per every contract they sold. Not too bad. Not too bad in that regard. They were taking advantage of that higher implied volatility. Higher IV in that regard is a little bit juicier premium. So could have also sold some and then bought them back to close as well to close out the position. So let's take a look here also at. I want to see kind of what was building up in that regard on GameStop, and then we'll take a look over at the chart here before we get you dialed in for the morning. We are going to pull up here some of our numbers. I just wanted to look at some of that spot gamma. The highest spot gamma I thought was around the 30, the open interest. Yeah. And we talked about this before with spot gamma. So if you need a little refresher here on what a spot gamma, we can provide you that real quick here. Spot gamma exposure is the assumed dollar value of gamma exposure that market makers need to hedge per 1% change of the underlying stock price. We've talked about this before. Positive value is long gamma, while negative value is short gamma. So we take a look over here. Net gamma exposure 2, and then gamma per 1% price change about 17 mil. So it kind of ramps up there at the 29 and 30 strikes. And then, oh, that's pretty awesome here. Hang on just a second. I'm going to zoom that back in and look at the time here. Okay. Pull up our. Look at that gamma here as well. So I wanted to see where the largest net gamma was building at 30, 29, 27. Yeah, so once it got going at 25, 26, 27, 28, it gets a little spicy there. And that's something we've talked about this. We saw this last summer as well. When that net gamma started getting a little bit high up on the higher strikes, and then we moved towards those. Those became more in the money. Market makers continue to buy shares to hedge against the position, and it creates more upside pressure. The opposite is when the gamma drops and the market makers will sell shares, which creates further downside pressure. So your delta exposure, again, high delta at 25, 20, and 30. So definitely exciting to see. I like that. Let's see, the most net delta geared up around this week's expiry, which is common week on week. And then the April 17th followed by June. So they're definitely building some delta exposures being built as far as net delta for April and June, which could suggest increased, or not increased, but continuing volatility, continuing price action, especially with the news with GameStop and Bitcoin and the sentiment. As you know, with it now being involved in Bitcoin, it may attract an entirely new generation of investors. And what I mean by that is those that are into Bitcoin or the idea of Bitcoin have now learned that GameStop, is going to add Bitcoin or can add Bitcoin as their treasury reserve asset, and that may appeal to those type of traders. And they may, I saw one yesterday that was actually added GameStop, just a small position based on the idea what they were doing with Bitcoin. So I thought that was unique to see as well. And take a look here at the charm exposure as well, and that Vanna. So all of this included unusual whales, very helpful. And like I said, if you want a discount on this, you can grab yourself one and just use my link on that. And you can get yourself a little discount. I mean, there's just a wealth of information here. I'm going to start working on some videos this year as well to cover more in-depth on unusual whales. But they have a full library on their YouTube and all across their social channels, of their platform, how to use it, what to look for, scanners, things I look for, flow alerts. Everybody's like, hey, how'd you catch the flow alerts? And they're all, you can set them up as on your own. You can fully customize them. You could rely explicitly just on unusual whales, providing flow alerts based on, kind of predefined criteria. So, I mean, for example, let's see. Let's just do a generic on GameStop here on just flow alerts. But I think I've got all mine customized, but let me just reset them here. I know, for the sake of the video here. And we'll just look at like what a generic GME flow alert came across as. See on the 25th, those 23 puts. Yeah, we just saw those. So repeating hit, descending fill. Let's see if those ones from Friday, the 21st. I think those were on there as well when we were talking about the 23 and 2350s. Yeah, we could go back. We'll save that for another day. But yeah, like just some even generic flow alerts are on there. So always something I look at, always something I rely on in that regard on the data. We'll pop over to that chart for 1 second. Coming right up on that 50 SMA yesterday of 2566. And then the 200 SMA at 2508. Pardon me. I'd been sick the last week and a half and finally getting over that. Let's see, the 9 and 21 EMA yesterday. 2432 on the 9 EMA. And 2435. I'm looking over there in the top left corner. Good volume yesterday. And then currently ahead of market open. 28.25 it's trading, and it's all 29.92. So trading well above, and look at the moving averages crossing over each other. So we'll see how this goes today, especially once the option market opens up, and we're ahead of the option market opening as we record this video. It'll go up after the market's open, but as of the time now, it's 8:27 ahead of the market open. So that's what I got for you today in that regard. As we took a look at the flow, earnings, Bitcoin, and a lot of sentiment here. So be careful with those close dated contracts, implied volatility at the market open. As always, manage your risk. It's nobody else's job to manage your portfolio but your own. I'm always here to try help. And I just want to see you make a little bit more money and lose a little less money. That's the objective here. And if you did watch the video all the way through, you're awesome. I can tell you're interested in learning, and that is what it's all about, learning. I like to learn, and I like to share, and I think it's incredible what we have here on X and what we're able to do together. So if you did watch today's video all the way through, why don't you reply to this post with GameStop and Bitcoin. Just put GameStop, Bitcoin, and I'll know that you'll watch today's video all the way through. Do appreciate the support. Make sure you go back, watch the other videos this week. You'll see all the goodness that I talked about. It could have got you in a position to make a few dollars this morning at the open. I hope you all have an incredible day. Happy Wednesday. Happy trading. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you around the internet.